Hello, and welcome to another book review. And today, I want to talk to you about The Great Game by Lavie Tidhar, the third book in the Bookman Histories as published by Angry Robot. This is a later printing, which is why the cover looks a little different than the other two. But the book is still in print through Angry Robot. And just like with the previous title, Camera Obscura, you don't necessarily have to have read the previous titles in order to read this one. There are references to the first two books, the Bookman and Camera Obscura, but they're not integral to the plot. But I think if you are going to read The Great Game, it would be fun to read the other two first, mostly because this is, for lack of a better word, the weakest of the three. I very much enjoyed the first two. I still enjoyed The Great Game, but it was the weakest of the three. But I'll get to that in a second. If you have not watched my book reviews of the other two, you can certainly check them out. But if you want to just start with this one, all the power to you. The Bookman Histories is a steampunk world in which the lines between history and fiction are kind of blurred. You have a lot of characters from both. You have your historical characters, like Queen Victoria, but she is a lizard Queen Victoria. You have your fictional characters, much like we have Lucy from Dracula, who's a main character in The Great Game here. And she's just kind of as if she's a real person. Frankenstein, as if he's a real person. But you also have Harry Houdini, who's another plot line of this. So one of the fun things, I guess, of the trilogy here, if you can call it a trilogy, is that Tidhar likes to keep splitting up the number of narrators. So the first novel, The Bookman, solely followed Orphan. The second novel, Camera Obscura, followed two main characters, one being Milady de Winter, the other being Kai. It was primarily Milady's story. The Great Game continues that split. We have three main storylines going on within this steampunk adventure. The primary one being Agent Smith, Mr. Smith, he's just Smith, a guy named Smith, who's a retired agent. He's a retired shadow executive, as they put it here on the back, who's kind of being brought back into service to solve a murder, much like Milady solving a murder in Camera Obscura, but different circumstances. We also follow Lucy from Dracula, Lucy Westenra, who is not the same Lucy as Dracula's Lucy. That's one thing that I've mentioned in the previous novels, is that you do have a lot of references to literary characters, but they're not necessarily the same as their literary counterparts. There are some connections. Frankenstein is still very much a mad scientist, but Lucy is almost like her own type of special agent. Working for the same agency as Smith, although they are on very different missions. And then the third main storyline follows a young Harry Houdini, a historical person, an actual human, who is, an amateur magician, escape artist, trying to make a name for himself and kind of getting into his own web of intrigue. There's also a little fourth storyline, a couple chapters here and there following an observer, but that's in the final act of the novel. So, as I said, The Great Game is primarily a murder mystery to start. But it's primarily an espionage novel. So it's kind of your espionage action novel. The first novel was very much The Bookman was your adventure novel. The second novel was your murder mystery. And the third novel, I guess, would be your espionage action flick. The cover... This is, like I said, the newer cover, which has a lot of blank space on it. But the previous cover had some very serious War of the Worlds vibes, which I loved. Kind of wish I grabbed that one, but this was what came in the mail. And I'm totally fine with it. So you are going to still get a ton of references. A lot of Dracula references, believe it or not. Not completely withstanding the fact that Lucy is here. You also get to see the likes of Jonathan Harker, Mina Harker, Van Helsing. You're actually going to go into the Carpathian Mountains for a little bit, although it's not necessarily Dracula that you're going to be expecting there. A little twist on the Carpathian Mountain journey. And it's not bad. There's a lot of fun references throughout. The main issue with The Great Game is that it tries to do a lot within its pages. We are talking under 400 pages. This is just under 400 right here. And it's following three storylines that are very fractured, and you almost have whiplash diving and switching between them all, which is kind of a shame because I feel like if he had just made it one, I mean, I guess it wouldn't have made sense to be one character or one plot line because you have some very, very polarizing storylines between what happens to Harry Houdini, what happens to Smith, what happens to Lucy. So it would be kind of bizarre to have it all happen to the same person. But I almost feel like if you had split it up into 3 novellas, for example, it may have been stronger. Unfortunately, less is sometimes more, and that can be, what you need in the great game here. It's, it's not bad. Oh, I guess the back of the book does spoil who gets killed. It's Mycroft Holmes, who is actually a character that was from the previous novels. So, spoiler alert from the back of the novel, the synopsis. It's Mycroft who is killed. And Agent Smith is reactivated to solve Mycroft's murder. And, yeah, I mean, it's not bad. It's still a pretty decent clockwork, steampunk adventure. The action is definitely the most action-packed of the 3 novels. Milady from the second novel, Camera Obscura, was very much a shoot first, ask questions later type of gal. There's a lot of shooting going on in the great game, usually at our protagonists before they get a chance to figure out what the hell is going on. So very action-packed. You're going from battle to battle. And then you get to Harry Houdini's chapters, which aren't necessarily action-packed. They are a lot more intriguing. You get a lot of weird stuff going on there, a little absurdist fiction with Houdini's chapters. So, I mean, each part works well in and of itself. It's just that when you put all 3 parts together, you kind of almost have a third of a novel each way through. And unfortunately, each third of that novel doesn't necessarily make a whole novel. It just leaves you with 3 sort of partial stories that leave you wanting more. And I guess that's kind of the big flaw of the great game. Let's say it's not bad. It's certainly not bad. And it talks about the end of days, a very secret service, only the beginning, and the arc. It's not terrible. If you liked the first 2 novels, you'll probably like the great game. If you didn't like the first 2 novels, there's probably not going to be anything to change your mind in the 3rd novel here. But like I said, you don't necessarily need to have read the other 2 titles to read the great game. But based on this one, in my opinion, being the lesser of the 3, I would recommend that you check out the Bookman or Camera Obscura first. Because if you start with the great game, 1, you're probably going to be confused and not want to go back to the other 2 novels, or it might spoil things such as Mycroft's passing, that, the character is still alive in the first 2 novels, even though it's not, integral to the plot of the whole trilogy as a whole. But yeah, I would say, if anything, start with the Bookman or Camera Obscura. Here are the new, I say new, this is probably like 10 years old, this new printing. Here's what the new covers look like for the Bookman and Camera Obscura. You can find them on Angry Robot's website. They are still in print, which is awesome for novels that, are relatively independent novels or small publisher novels from over 10 years ago. So it's very admirable they are still in print. And I think it's to your benefit because Lavie Tidhar is a really good writer. He nails dialogue incredibly well. His dialogue, I mentioned this in the other reviews, can be a little alarming at first. Sometimes you might have a paragraph that starts with one character talking, and then in that same paragraph, it goes to the next character talking, which is very unconventional. But he makes it work. You get used to it pretty early on. And yeah, it's a fun read. Check out Lavie Tidhar. I'm going to be moving on to another one of his books very shortly. It's one of his books that was an upset in the World Fantasy Awards. It's Osama, which beat out both George R. R. Martin's Dance of Dragons and Stephen King's 11/22/63 for the best fantasy novel at the World Fantasy Awards. I'll be reading that one soon. I got a couple other books to read before then, but please consider liking and subscribing if you want to check out more of these book reviews, at least 1 a week, been 2 the past few weeks, and plenty of unboxing videos in between there to hold you over. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you around next time.